Thank you, Anna. I apologize for my voice, but I will try to do my best and I hope you understand. I would like to welcome all to this session on Amílcar Cabral. I would like to thank EADI for hosting this seminar and this conversation on that. My name is Pedro Goulart, as Anna said, and today we will look to Amílcar Cabral, who had many versions, and we will talk of some of these today. He was an independence leader. He was a thinker, and we will review some of these sites. His worldwide influence actually has researched recently. This has received further attention today. This session was promoted on a special issue on Caderno de Estudos Africanos. I will put some information later on the chat. Aurora, Almada e Santos, Almada e Santos, Carlos Lopes and myself were editors that gathered different contributors on the topic. And today we will have Aurora Almada e Santos to introduce a bit the issue. Mike Powell from the Review of African Political Economy that will also bring some issues. And Julião, Soares e Sousa that a biographer of Cabral that will bring some contributions on the topic. Clara Carvalho and Vasco Martins from Caderno de Estudos Africanos unfortunately were not able to join, but we leave also our thanks for hosting and the papers in their journal. In the end of the interventions, there will be some space for discussion. Feel free also of posting some of the issues on the chat. I will post some information also to be more interactive in the chat. But without further ado, I will pass to Aurora Almada e Santos. She is an expert on independence movements and decolonization, and I will gladly hear her also a bit. Go ahead, Aurora.
Thank you, Pedro. Good afternoon to everybody. It's a pleasure to be here with you to present this special issue on Amílcar Cabral. I think that probably most of you that are here are familiarized with the figure of Cabral, but even so, let me just start with a brief introduction about who he was and why we decided to publish a special issue around his figure. Well, Amílcar Cabral was born in Guinea-Bissau. He was the son of two Cabo Verdean immigrants. And for those that are familiar with the colonial history, the Portuguese colonial history, they know that the Cabo Verdeans often immigrated for other Portuguese colonies, namely Guinea, São Tomé, or Angola. And Amílcar Cabral's parents were part of this circulation in the Portuguese colonial world. Amílcar Cabral was raised for some time in Guinea, and then he went to Cabo Verde, and afterwards here to Portugal, where he arrived in 1945 to study. After his studies, he went to Guinea, and then he returned to Portugal. He worked with Angola and also with the Portuguese government. And in the late 50s, he started to engage with the struggle for the independence of Portuguese colonies. And nowadays, there is a huge volume of studies, publications about Amílcar Cabral. And among the leaders of the liberation movements from Portuguese colonies, I think we can say that Amílcar Cabral is one that has been receiving more attention. And this attention to the figure of Amílcar Cabral has been centered in many different aspects. People have been studying how he conducted the liberation struggle as a Secretary General of the PIGC, but also there is a huge volume of publication about his thought, what he wrote and what he said. Perhaps this is one of the most innovative ways of studying Cabral. And also we have a third aspect about Cabral that has been studied, which is the memory and how people nowadays, both in Guinea, Cabo Verde, but also in diaspora, namely here in Portugal, has been engaging with Cabral's memory. Through films, through books, through music, and so on. So, since in 2024, we celebrated the centennial of Cabral, we thought that it would be a very good opportunity to gather a group of scholars and to organize a publication around the figure of Cabral. Between 2024 and last year, 2025, there was a lot of initiatives around Cabral's figures, and our special issue was designed to be one of the contributions to this reappraisal of Amílcar Cabral, his actions and his works and his memory. So the original idea was from Clara Carvalho. She was back then the main coordinator of the Cadernos de Estudos Africanos. So she approached us and invited us to be guest editors of a volume about Amílcar Cabral. We accepted this proposal gladly because Cadernos de Estudos Africanos is one of the main publications here in Portugal that that published papers on Africa. And we also accept the invitation because Cadernos de Estudos Africanos is hosted by the University Institute of Lisbon, ISCTE, which is one of the most well-known universities here in Portugal, dedicating to the study of Africa in its different aspects, whether history, political science, anthropology, and so on. We had a huge support from the Cadernos de Estudos Africanos. They did their best to help us, and we appreciate this effort. And so today we are here to share with you the results of this effort that we undertook to publish the special issue. We have with us Mike Powell and Julião Sousa, which was one of the contributors to the special issue. So now I give the floor to Mike Powell. So if you wish to go ahead and to start.
Well, thank you very much, Aurora. It's lovely to be here. Albeit perhaps a bit fraudulently, because I didn't contribute to the special issue, although I very much appreciated your mention of my work for a review of African political economy in your introduction to that. And I'm also not an academic, although we'll come back to that in a minute. but I don't think you have to be an academic to appreciate the value of Cabral and his work, not least because he was an academic for part of his life, but not for other parts. I first came across him when I was 21 years old and a history student and an activist, particularly in relation to international solidarity and intercultural learning. And his ideas, linked as they were to the incredible achievements of his revolutionary practice, were just a breath of fresh air that swept into my life. And there are many of them that I could talk about, which were very relevant to my concerns then, and which remain relevant to the challenges we face today. I should mention the importance given by the PAIGC, at least in his lifetime, to the politics of gender. The groundbreaking requirement that at least 2 of every 5-person village committees should be women. The serious exploration of what else could be done in this area, all of which has been well described near the time by Stephanie Erdung, amongst others. And in a context then of being surrounded by a very Eurocentric and often doctrinaire Marxism, there was his focus on modes of production.
Excuse me, Mike. Could you please show us your face? We are seeing only a bit of top.
Oh.
Yeah, that would be better. Thank you.
Sorry. I'm sorry. But honestly, the face is the least important part. But I continue. So in a context of being surrounded by a Eurocentric and often doctrinaire Marxism, there was his focus on modes of production as a means of analyzing socio-economic relations before and after capitalism and beyond Europe, which he made in his Weapon of Theory speech in Havana in 1966, and was subsequently developed completely independently, I think, more academically by Samir Amin and Manuel Castells, amongst others. But in the short time available today, I want to focus on 3 other aspects of his work, all linked, which are perhaps less well known, although the tragedy is that very little of his work is well known in the Anglophone world at least, and which are particularly relevant to today's challenges. The first is what I would call his general approach, and a Cabralian approach, which was a permanent focus on reality and what could be done to make that reality better. Second, a mastery of praxis. He had a deep appreciation of the value of intellectual labor and of the need for theory to be able to understand the realities we face and to guide practice. But, and this is less usual, he had an equal understanding of the value of lived experience and of reflection on it to learn, to critique, and to improve theory. And he had a profound understanding that social relations and social change depend on multiple and dialectic interactions and are always dynamic, never static. Theory and practice must always be open to further development, and dogma is doomed to fail. Now, I believe that this approach can be applied to virtually all areas of life. It can certainly be applied to academic study, and Cabral certainly had close friends, Mario de Andrade for one, who were predominantly intellectuals. However, for me, I decided then that Africa didn't really need any more British historians, however radical. So I retrained as a nurse and have spent most of my life working on development and related issues, a path which incidentally should also be subject to similar critique that I will give academia. Next, I would draw attention to Cabral as a pioneer of political ecology, or to use the now slightly archaic word that he used, mesology. I hope most of you, at least those of you who are not central bankers or economists, have come to an awareness that it is not possible to think about human development without seeking an in-depth understanding of how any development affects and interacts with our natural environment. For many of us, this realization, or at least its full impact, has only become clear relatively recently. Cabral had it from the start. His study of climate and soil of the Cuba region in southern Portugal in, I think, the early 50s, includes the assertion that to defend the land is to defend the human being. And his entire practice as an agronomist included the human relations of agricultural production, be they how the social structure of different ethnic groups in Guinea affected their farming practice in his agricultural census of Guinea, written in the late 50s, or his critiques of how colonial policy, in particular the forced expansion of groundnut production for export, degraded the land. The key points are that for Cabral, the liberation of the land involved the soil, the plants, the forests, and the fauna, as well as the people. And that once you realize this, it becomes even more obvious as you reread his writings and speeches, especially those directed at party cadres, which time and time again draw their examples from the land and its use. I would love to go on about this at length, but we don't have the time. But it is an area for further exploration, and which can start with some papers I'm going to put into the chat at the end, some references, but one is Philippa Cesar's wonderful paper called Meteorization. There's a section on decolonizing Luso-African mesology in D.A. Wood's book, Epistemic Decolonization, and an article written by Carlos Cardozo in the journal issue that we're discussing today. And of course, there's a lot in Cabral's own writing. Finally, I would like to discuss Cabral's work in the context of today's debates about the politics of knowledge. These frequently take place in the context of discussions about decolonizing knowledge, not least with EADI, I might mention. And I have to be careful here to keep the focus on Cabral and not too much on my own opinions. But what is, to my mind, clear is that epistemic injustice takes many different forms, which collectively contribute to the exclusion of many knowledges from the prevailing canons of recognized knowledge, and that these exclusions help no one, neither the oppressed, but even more so perhaps not the oppressor. And these forms include attitudes and practices formed in colonial and racist pasts that continue in our highly unequal present. The question is whether colonizing, decolonizing is the right filter through which to analyze such issues. And I refer you to Olufemi Taiwo's book, Against Decolonization, which argues that particularly in Africa, it is not. And to be clear here, he specifically excludes South American concepts of coloniality, decoloniality from his analysis, but I still suggest it is worth reading. Obviously, Cabral is not with us to participate in such debates, but what can definitely be said is this. Firstly, he was a modernizer, at the same time as an opposer of colonial modernity. He was a serious believer in science, albeit in a science based on constantly involving interactions between science, societies, and the environment. And he explicitly believed in a universal knowledge from which the Guinean people could learn, but to which they were, through their struggle, and would increasingly, as liberated agents, contribute. But he thought it was up to his liberated people, and not foreign diktat, to determine which knowledge should or should not be accepted as universal. And I might mention in passing that another vitally important African intellectual, Ngugi wa Thiong'o, who was author of the 1986 book, Decolonizing the Mind, about his experiences as a lecturer at the University of Nairobi in the 60s and 70s. He has come up with a similar argument in his book, Globalectics, which sees basically a world with no center, but with multiple localities, each society recognizing their own linguistic, cultural traditions, but also using and recognizing the work of others. So from this, I would argue that Cabral would take the politics of knowledge very seriously, but I don't think he would worry that much about whether knowledge was colonial or not. just as he never really worried about Marxism in the sense of whether he was being a good Marxist or not. In terms of knowledge itself, I believe he would have sought the knowledge that was most useful to the struggles of the people of Guinea-Bissau and Cape Verde at the stage of their struggle in what they're trying to achieve, and very conscious of the fact that to be useful, such knowledge would have to make sense to the people. It would have to be something they could identify with, and hence his great interest in culture and identity. And in terms of knowledge production, I believe he would analyze it as an industry, a mode of production, and seek solutions which would reduce exploitation and promote knowledge work as a social good. But in any case, and whatever you make of my own interpretations, I hope it is clear that Cabral's thought remains very relevant today. Pedro, I don't know if you want to take over now.
Thank you, Mike. I will give the floor back to Aurora. Maybe she wants to come.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mike. Very interesting talk, and I think the audience will find a lot of things to engage with the knowledge that you share about Amílcar Cabral. So before we go to our next speaker, which is Julião Soares Sousa, let me just briefly speak about the special issue to which Julião Sousa contributed. So we have several papers. One of them is authored by Carlos Opes and Peter Caribe Mendy about reimagining African narratives, Amílcar Cabral Revolutionary Contributions. Julião Soares Sousa is the author of Amílcar Cabral and the instrumental and utilitarian role of the Portuguese language in the struggle for independence in Guinea and Cabo Verde. We have also a paper co-authored by several authors, Miguel de Barros, Sumaila Jaló, Red Wilson Lima, and Alexander Robalo, which explore social movements in Guinea-Bissau and Cabo Verde, dialogues, legacies, and reinterpretations of Cabral's thinking about culture. Besides this, we have two essays, one from Pedro Goulart about participation and social policies in Portugal under the spectre of Amílcar Cabral, and another by Carlos Cardoso, por uma meta-análise do pensamento de Amílcar Cabral. Besides this, the special issue is complemented by three book reviews. We choose books that somehow engaged with the liberation struggles in the Portuguese colonies and that were published between 2024 and 2025. So I invite you to explore in the website of the journal, Cadernos de Estudos Africanos. These papers, they are all in open access in English and Portuguese, so you will be able to access them. So now I give the floor to Julião Soares Sousa. So Julião will summarize the main ideas present in his paper about how Cabral approached the Portuguese language in the context of the struggle for the independence of Guinea and Cabo Verde. So Julião, please.
Good afternoon to everybody. Thank you very much, Aurora. I don't have, I have some difficulties to show my video, my face. I don't know what's happening here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you quite well. The sound is very good, so you can go ahead, please.
Can I go ahead?
Yes,
okay,
yes, no problem. Sounds very good.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank the editors of the special issue and congratulate them on its publication. I extend these congratulations also to the editors of the journal, Cadernos de Estudos Africanos, and I would also like to extend my greetings to all the contributors to these special issues. this paper titled Amílcar Cabral and the Instrumental Role of the Portuguese Language examines precisely the instrumental and utilitarian role of the Portuguese language in the struggle for independence of Guinea and Cape Verde, focusing on Amílcar Cabral reflections and contribution to that debate. As a general overview, the question that arose and which prompted us to write this article was on that came up on several occasions during the national liberation struggle. Which language should we be adopted in the national liberation struggle and after the independence? That was the general question. This was the question that from time to time, circulated within the liberation movement and among some post-colonial African states, and which still resonates today in the concerns of Guinean writers such as Odette Semedo. At the time of the liberation struggle, there was also a faction that believed it made no sense to fight against colonialism while adopting its language. Therefore, taking a more radical stance, they refused to maintain the status quo. We recall that this debate within the liberation movement was not new at that time. It was part of the broader debate that flowed the African decolonization process of the 60s, during which two groups emerged in Africa. One group that argued that people should abandon the colonizer language and return to the indigenous African language as a means of decolonizing minds and achieving linguistic independence. One of its proponents was, as several of you know, it was Frantz Fanon, who justified abandoning the colonizer language by arguing that adopting the language means embracing a culture of the colonizer. The second group defended the appropriation of European language. This group included prominent African writers like Chinua Achebe, Gabriel Okara, Amos Utuola, and even Leopold Sédar Senghor from Senegal was in the middle of this group. In the specific stance of the PAGC, it can be argued that the debate was very intense because there was a lack of comprehension regarding the rationale behind the maintenance of the defense of the Portuguese language within the liberation movement's educational institutions. This language was perceived by a faction of PAGC as a language of the colonizers or the language of the foreigners. In general terms, in addition to the introduction and conclusion, the paper was divided in three sections. The first section addressed how the debate of the adoption or not of the Portuguese language unfolded across the liberation movement of the Portuguese colonies throughout the 60s. We wondered whether the ethic, neutrality, or lack thereof of the leaders of the liberation movement regarding the defense of the Portuguese language, as was the case of Amílcar Cabral and his advocacy for interethnic unity, might not have been a key factor of the development of this debate. In the other movement, the issue seems to have been avoided, for example, in the MPLA, with the exception of Riato da Cruz, who, before the movement split, advocated for the instrumental use of the Portuguese language as a tool for emancipation, just as it had been used by colonialism as a tool of domination. From 1962 onward, the language issue seems to have been set aside only to resurface in 1974 in the party's program that gave national and ethnic minorities the freedom to use their language and create their scripts. The discussion on this matter within Frelimo was more conservative, despite his advocacy for national unity. Within the PSGC, although Cabral favored a radical transformation of colonial structures and their replacement with new ones, he never supported the idea that this should entail abandoning the Portuguese language, especially in the science, education, and technology, or as in an official language after independence. The second section focuses on how the PSGC and its leader, Amílcar Cabral, viewed and conceived the adoption of the Portuguese language for a dual perspective, as an instrument of domination, but also as an instrument of liberation. Finally, the third section that analyzed the pragmatic and instrumental character with which Cabral viewed the Portuguese language, especially regarding how to it served to communicate and express reality. Let's go directly to the conclusions and to a critical or radical linguistic decolonialization. The article concludes that Amílcar Cabral adopted a pragmatic and instrumental stance towards the Portuguese language, advocating its use as a tool for unification, resistance, and scientific progress without denying the importance of local language or even Criollo, which he always regarded not as a language but as a dialect. However, the Portuguese language was seen as the only viable means for training professionals or for national and international communication in that historical context. Cabral's approach also advocated for a cultural synthesis that would promote the decolonization of minds without abandoning the tools inherited by colonialism that could serve the development of the peoples of Guinea and Cape Verde, as was the case with the Portuguese language, at least for an extended period of time. He argued that adopting Portuguese did not imply cultural submission, but rather a strategic choice for the advancement of the people. He permitted and encouraged the study and development of Criollo and local language, but considered Portuguese indispensable in the short and medium term. Cabral viewed Portuguese as an instrument of both colonial domination and liberation and progress. He advocated for the use of Portuguese in education, science, and administration, as it was the only written language understood by a significant portion of the movement's leadership. He thus rejected, I'm going to the end, the immediate abandonment of the Portuguese, advocating for a critical assimilation, which involved adopting useful aspects of the colonizer culture and language while rejecting those considered negative. This is, in general, our critical analysis about this article, and I hope that it will be useful for the researchers in the next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Julião. Thank you, Aurora, and thank you, Mike. We will now, I apologize for my voice. We will now open the space for the debate. Feel free to put comments, questions. I will just ask to be concise, especially because we have several experts also on Cabral in the audience, that surely we will benefit from their comments. But please be concise for everybody be able to comment, and then we go back to the speakers for a final wrap up. Okay. Does anybody want to start? I also have some comments, but I will leave to the end. Please, Isabel, go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Well, first of all, thank you so much for this great forum to discuss one of the greatest men of 20th century. My question / a comment is to Julião Sousa. I really liked your paper, and which is a topic that I'm researching on, the politics of language from the colonial to the post-colonial period. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit more in terms of the connection, if you find any connection between Viriato da Cruz, Amílcar Cabral, and Joseph Stalin's writing on language and politics. It seems to me that the idea of language and instrument was developed a lot by Stalin, especially in his 1950s article in Pravda, namely the paper on Marxism and the question of language. So if you could discuss a little bit what you found in terms of the connection between Marxism, especially Stalin's views on Marxism, a question of language, and to what extent that idea traveled to Cabral through Viriato da Cruz. Thank you.
Thank you, Abel. Anyone else? While we see if others are coming, if others want to ask questions, I will start with my own. For Aurora, can you talk a bit about the travels of Cabral? Cabral have linked to many different places, to many different people, and this is quite interesting effort of bridging different sides, different versions. And well, you are the expert. You tell us a bit more on that. For Mike, maybe you want to bring in some information on Cabral and Basil Davidson's interaction, and bring something for the debate. Regarding to Julião, I would also be interested regarding his biographical issues. Can you tell us a bit more about his personal characteristics? This also, I think it's interesting. How does his practice, as Mike Powell was saying, it comes also from some of his characteristics of his the relationship with others and so on. Does anybody want to join some comments, or shall we first kick in and? Okay, let us maybe start. Aurora, do you want to start with the travels? And,
Thank you very much for the question. Yes, this is a very important topic, and only in recent years that we started to explore this issue of Cabral travels. I think Julião can say this better than I, but I have the idea that Cabral invested most of his time in the diplomatic front. He was most of the time away traveling and not in Conakry at the PIGC headquarters. And I think nowadays we have an idea that he did more than 100 travels between the end of the 50s and 1973 when he was killed. So his travel were to the African countries, so we try a lot to gather support from African countries. like for instance Algeria, and also Tanzania and so on. Besides Senegal, obviously that Senegal was an obvious choice because it had frontiers with Guinea-Bissau. He also traveled a lot to Asia. Namely to China and to North Korea. In the socialist world, he traveled to Soviet Union, to Czechoslovakia, to Romania, for instance. And in the so-called Western world, he traveled to the United States several times, sometimes to attend the United Nations meetings, and then he did tours to the United States, but also to France, to Italy or United Kingdom, and also to the Nordic countries, where he went several times to explore the humanitarian support, namely from Sweden. So through his travel, Amílcar Cabral was able to gather the material and the political support that the PAIGC needed, especially in the beginning, in the early 60s, to start the war, to start the liberation war in Guinea-Bissau. But it was also these travels and this networking that Amílcar Cabral established, which that allowed him to become such a huge figure in the struggle for the independence of the Portuguese colonies. And I have the idea that he traveled much more than Agostinho Neto, than Eduardo Mondlane, or even Samora Machel. At least in the United Nations sessions, Cabral was always present, while the MPLA, the Frelimo, or the FNLA were represented by second-ranking militants. And besides this issue of travels, Cabral travels, there is another issue that I would like also to call attention, is the letters that Cabral exchanged with people around the world. We have some idea about this. I think Vitor Barros, that is present, started to engage with the subject, but I think we still need to understand also Cabral exchange of letters with people around the world, because his networking was built not only through travel but also through correspondence. So I think that is a subject yet that we still need to explore.
Mike, do you want to continue?
Yes, thank you. I'll come on to your question in a second, Pedro, but just to respond a bit to what Aurora's has been saying. I mean, I do agree with travels are really interesting. And there are bits of it, well, partly because his speeches are often when at these events are when he most articulately, I mean, expressed his deeper, his more profound thinking about what was behind the war and the process he was engaged in. And as I've made a point on the blog I've referred to, written for Roy, I mean, he only ever did something for a reason connected to the struggle. So he never had the leisure to write a refereed article, well, not after he ceased being an agronomist, or to write a book. So it is these events which give the opportunity to learn more about him, and as well as these talks about liberation and culture and liberation and identity, which he gave he gave often various versions of the same speech in different places. But there is also a chapter, I think it's in the Return to the Source book. If not, it's in Weapon of Theory. Those were the first two books of his published in English language. And at the end of it, there is a really interesting description of a meeting he held in New York. He was there attending some UN summit, and then he went down to Harlem one evening and invited sort of various activists from the Black community to come and have a chat. And it's absolutely fascinating, both from a sort of any student of Black politics in America, but also the interaction and how open he was to the interaction, and which gives you a real indication of him as a person as well. So I really like that. And then also linked a bit to the bit we aren't covering in this talk about but your work and you did in that issue around his sort of wider influence in today's youth movements and in the diaspora. I just thought I would mention in passing, in case you've not seen it, a work by a Moroccan artist called Boutra Khalili, called The Foreign Office, which is about essentially it's about Algiers as a center of world revolution in the late 60s. And Cabral features, well, the main part of the film is it's a sort of multimedia presentation, but the main part of it is an interview of two young Algerians about what this means to them now, and some of what she's showing they knew about and some they didn't, but the ideas of liberation and justice, of course, they're very clear about. So I really recommend it's hard to get hold of because I think it's only ever put up in an exhibition. I've tried to get hold of an actual sort of video of it without success. Which actually also overlaps with the point about Cabral and language. You can misunderstand. I mean, these things can be quite misunderstood because the settings can be very different. So when Fanon, who I mean, also going back to the decolonization argument, Fanon is also a major figure in post-war French psychiatry, which is a rather sort of because African scholars don't really study him as a psychiatrist. They don't necessarily realize how mainstream, albeit radical, he was within the interior dynamics of French thinking in France. But I'm sure his views on language in Algeria would have been influenced by the fact, well, firstly by what he witnessed as the exclusion and denial of local culture, but also by the fact that, I mean, in Algeria there are essentially only two natural languages, I believe, apart from French, i.e. Arabic and Berber, and the situation in Guinea-Bissau, which, as I recall, has something like 28 languages in it, in a country, in a small country, and I think maybe even to get to any one language getting much above 30%. That's a very different sort of real life context to Algiers or possibly even Russia. So I just make that point in passing. And I make these points at length because I don't really have a lot to add, Pedro, about Basil Davidson. I mean, he was, he was someone I had the great honor of. He was a mentor of mine and someone I met on many occasions, and I wouldn't have got to Guinea-Bissau myself without him. But I think, I can't say anything better than he's written about Guinea-Bissau, I think. Other than to just mention to those who don't perhaps know it, but Basil also wasn't an academic, and one of his interests and he'd kind of wondered. He'd been in the Second World War in the British Army and had actually in sort of special operations and had risen to the rank of colonel. And his basic job was to liaise with communist partisans in Yugoslavia and then in northern Italy. And I think this gave him a huge personal connection with Cabral because they both understood what it was like to actually be in enemy occupied territory and to rely on people for your life, for your safety. So that was one thing I would say. And the other was to bring into this conversation a bit the fact that when you're talking about what there's nothing wrong with a focus on Cabral at all, but I think we should also recognize how much of his travels, his talks, his conversations would involve people like Maria de Andrade and also Aquino de Bragança, Which I just would like their names mentioned in any discussion about the sort of intellectual development of Cabral and their continuing relevance.
Thank you, Mike. Then Julião will also come in, and
Julião, I think you can go ahead since Pedro's internet is not working well. So can you go ahead, please?
Me?
Yes, I think you can go ahead, Julião.
Yes, okay. Well, I think that I didn't understand very well the question raised by Pedro Vaz Goulart when he talked about personal characteristics. But I will try to answer a little bit, Mike, and then I will go back to the Pedro Goulart. Yes. Well, I didn't study very well the connections that we can make about Cabral, Viriato Cruz, and Stalin. But I think that there is a link between Viriato Cruz and Amílcar Cabral concerning these aspects of the Portuguese language. As I've raised in the text, in the paper, Viriato Cruz, he wrote in 1960 that the language is like the stone that David and Goliath threw at each other. So when he's in the side of David, he belongs to David. When he is in the side of Goliath, he will belong to Goliath. So this way of thinking about Portuguese language is very, very connected to the idea. This idea of the instrumental idea that Cabral had about the Portuguese language. It was not only the language of the aliens, like even Viriato Cruz also wrote in 1960, but also it can be also a language that can serve the purpose of the independence of the peoples, of the subaltern peoples. So. I think that in this way there is a very strong connection between the Viriato Cruz thinking about and Cabral thinking about the Portuguese language. They didn't see the language as only as a language of colonizers, and that have to be fighted as they were fighting the colonialism in general. So. Even Viriato Cruz, he know that the language, as Cabral also, they know that the language was introduced and it was imposed to the indigenous population. But in the case of the Angola with Viriato Cruz, because after 1962, there was a change in the leadership of MPLA. So the debate about Portuguese language was very, very conservative. I didn't find any debate about situation, but I saw that the movement was very, very busy thinking about the idea of interethnic unity. So that was what fixed the MPLA in after 1962. They just recovered this idea of Portuguese language in 1974, just 1 year before the independence of Angola. But in PAGC, the debate was very, very old, since the beginning of the liberation movement. So I think, yes, there is a very strong connection between Beata Cruz and Amílcar Cabral in this topic about the Portuguese language. Concerning the personal characteristics, I didn't understand very well the Pedro Vaz Goulart question.
My comment was just the same. The practice of the person is also related to some of the personal characteristics that you may have faced when doing the biographies, and this was my idea. But if you want to think a bit about it, we can also start with Vitor, and then Julião finishes.
Okay.
Vitor, do you want to come in?
Yes. Okay. Do you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Correctly. Okay. So, hello everybody, and congratulations for this inspiring event, and also congratulations for this special issue. And I would like to join this discussion by underlining two topics. First, the fact that there is a rich topics and subjects that we can find in the correspondence that Cabral produced during the liberation struggle period. So it's not only the correspondence that he addressed to the people who were part of his affective relationship, but the most political and diplomatic correspondence produced during this period. And the geographical distribution of the correspondence tell us a lot about the ramifications and the networks that Cabral produced during that period. This is the first my first comment that I would like to join the Aurora Almada talk. The second one, I would like to engage with the discussion on decolonizing knowledge that elaborated by Mike Powell. And it's important, I think, the Cabral ideas can contribute very well and strongly to endorse the discussion on decolonizing knowledge. And also, even when we talk about language, we cannot link language with culture, and we can approach critically how Cabral's concept of culture relates to decolonizing knowledge. Okay, and I think it's also important to reread his weapon of theory speech, and how we can read today his weapon of theory in decolonial terms. And at least I think it's also important when we talk about the decolonizing knowledge, it's important to see or to think about how the educational practices implemented in the liberated areas during the liberated struggle period, how these decolonial or these educational practices anticipated the current debates that we have today on curriculum decolonization. I think it's important to see when we talk about decolonizing or decolonial knowledge, it's important to see how some practices and ideas of Cabral can help us to shed light in a more critical approach regarding how some practices anticipate some theoretical debates that we try to engage today, namely, as I said, the current debate on curriculum decolonization, because at the time, the practice of education implemented in the liberated areas anticipated this debate, anticipated this practice, and I think it's important to take into consideration this example and to think in the more rich perspective, the perspective, or to enrich the perspective about the decolonizing knowledge. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vitor. Julião, do you want to say something on that regard, or
me?
then are you fine? Do you want to say something more on the audience?
Yeah. Yes, yes, I agree with Vitor Barros and with his comments about this question of decolonizing knowledge, and because that was exactly what was happening in the liberated areas of PAGC, also in Conakry, where they have some pilot school working functioning. All the education system was prepared to defend the Portuguese language, because at the beginning it was really difficult for the PAGC to set out this idea of the Portuguese language, but they managed to solve the problem, elaborating the textbooks in Portuguese, even translating some books. I think I wrote in this article, I brought the example of a Bulgarian writer that one of his books was translated to the PAGC and was used in their schools, which is really a new. For me, it was really surprising. I didn't know that. I found it in the archive, and I was really surprised with this introduction of the materials from Bulgaria. But all the education system of the PAGC, the idea was to defend the Portuguese language, I think. Even using the name of the kids and that we can saw we can see in the textbooks the indigenous names, and that is an example that if the Portuguese language can go side by side with the Creole and national languages, but the Portuguese stands in the top of this language, because for Cabral, it was very important for education system to have the Portuguese as language, a unifying language, because, and we can introduce even another aspect that for me was important in this debate, the idea that Cabral was a detribalized man, leader, and he didn't belong to any ethnic group from Guinea-Bissau. Then it stayed in a position to assume the idea of national unity. So I think this debate didn't develop too much in the Angola and Mozambique, just because their leadership was very linked to some ethnic groups. So in the PAGC, the situation was really, really different. But apart from the idea of the education system, we have also the radio programs. The programs was broadcast in the radio, National Liberation Radio. Even if we can show that they have some news in the national language, but the Portuguese was used to spread, the news to the Portuguese side also. So it was very important to highlight this aspect. But I think the Cabral and his stance for ethnic neutrality it was very important for the national unity and a very important instrument in this context of the national liberation struggle.
Thank you, Julião. Thank you, Julião. I will pass to Mike and Aurora. We are almost finishing. If somebody wants to put a question in the chat, feel free. But in the meantime, I will give the word to Mike and Aurora for the final words.
All right. Well, thank you. I have very little to add, actually, except to thank you for setting this up, and I hope it's been interesting for everyone.
Maybe you want to speak on Paulo Freire's story that you...
Well, I just put that in the comment there, that Paulo Freire, who I'm sure you all heard about, actually worked in Guinea-Bissau after independence. He only visited it once or twice, I think, but he was involved in a program working with the Ministry of Education in Bissau, and it was very well documented in this book, Pedagogy in Process, which is also very accessible. Sometimes people complain about Freire being quite difficult to follow, but I never found that. I certainly didn't find that problem with this book. So I just comment on that, and I say thank you, everyone. I think there's a lot of interesting discussions promoted on this. I'm very interested and pleased that language has been a major topic of this, because it is complex, and there's no simple right answer. I think, and that, as I was trying to make clear, in a sense, that's one of the things I really like about Cabral, is that he doesn't go for simple answers and then hit people over the head with them at all. He acknowledges complexity and the need to work through it. And language is one of them. And like I said, what he would have thought had he been in a country which had one or two main languages, as opposed to being in one with 28, is well, maybe Julião could tell us more, but I don't know. But I think these raise problems, but they're also very serious issues, as Victor has said. These are absolutely fundamental to what happens. And I know that what has happened has obviously not been what we would all have hoped back at the time of liberation. But that leaves us with a problem of what to do now to make things go forward. So let's and I think Cabral's thinking can still help us with that. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, to finish, I would like to say that I think we are just in the beginning of learning about Cabral, and I do believe that in the near future we will have much more papers, books, chapters about Amílcar Cabral. You can see for the participants in this session that we have people around the world interested in Cabral, and in fact we have been seeing that papers about Cabral are being published in the United States, Brazil, United Kingdom, France, Italy, also in Asia. So I do believe that the fact that people around the world are engaging with Cabral is in the end a sign of the relevance that he had in the liberation struggle of Guinea-Bissau and Cape Verde. And I think we have yet a lot to do, a lot to study about him. So I would also to express again my appreciation for the organizer of this webinar, also to the Cadernos de Estudos Africanos, and for all the authors that contributed to the special issue. So thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you to the speakers. Thank you to Victor also to step in. Thank you to for the organization, and let us keep talking. Today was not Portuguese, was English, but the point is that we can share knowledge and that we can continue the interactions. Have a nice day, and let us keep in touch.